Supply is not a straightforward equation like demand. The supply may mean the amount offered for sale per unit of time. Technology will definitely have a greater impact in the long run. Market will always set expectations on companies. Good morning and welcome to the session 4 in Unit 1 Business Decision Theories, where we are going to speak about the supply analysis. Now, moving further, what is supply analysis? Until now, we have been speaking about demand and the factors of demand. But now we are coming to the next part of the history called as supply analysis. So, supply is a research and the analysis is done to understand the supply trends, responses changing to the market and production variable. Supply is actually a complicated variable according to me. Why? Because supply is not a straightforward equation like demand. It involves a lot of factors, like if you see the diagram here, the input price, the owner's price, technology expectation, number of producers. So it has got a lot of complications involved, a lot of factors involved in terms of arriving at the real value of supply. So what happens in supply analysis has rightly been pointed out there. It is a research. You need to go through, understand each and every step. It cannot be taken hands-on saying that, yes, supply is done, this is over, that's what we are looking into it. It is not a straight line formula altogether. So what supply analysis will try to do is that it will take into account the production cost, raw material cost, technology, labor, wages, etc. Now, let's come back to our country as an example. India as a growing hub of manufacturing in the world. Gone are the days when India used to depend on the imports. Today, India has become an exporting hub. Whether you talk about textiles, whether you talk about technology, you talk about leather, or you talk about gems, or you talk about any other business, even in automobiles for that matter. India has converted itself rather than to an exporting hub, more than saying that I'm an importing personality altogether, which means India's emphasis has shifted more towards a manufacturer base. And India has tried to make itself as a supplier to the world in terms of the needs, in terms of the demand altogether. Why is this shift happening and why is this shift important? That's what we need to understand when we come to the supply analysis. Over a period of time, we have understood that supply is an overall factor where you can get all these things, the cost, input, raw materials, technology, people, process at a lower cost, manufacture it and export it at a higher price, which means to say that for most of the manufacturing companies across the world, they look for prices where it is at the minimum so that you can manufacture it at a large quantity and then export it across the globe. So India understood this factor, of course, of late, but then what has happened here is that our country has slowly started adopting to the global model altogether. Today, when you see different models of car arriving in India, that's because we have also started opening up ourselves to become the next motor world altogether. Now, there was a time when Detroit in America was called as the motor city altogether. Similarly, today in India, Chennai is being called as the motor city, which means it has become a very big hub for all the automobile manufacturers. And this is becoming quite true. Why? Because today we are harnessing the manufacturing capacity. We have become leaders in different angles, in different methods altogether. So what we want to do is that we want to see the higher end of the supply chain. We want to reach that position where we are able to supply the world with what it needs. So supply is something, the direct factor of revenue that we are talking about. So that's why when you look here, the responses to the changing market, Market is today changing very, very dynamically because the needs of the customer are changing in a very rapid manner. Customers are not looking into market as one single factor. They're looking into different dynamics altogether. Let's take the example of Hyundai cars itself. When they first landed in India with the Santro, probably they believed that that's enough because India just believes a small family car, which was quite an important competition to the Maruti 800, the Maruti Alto segment altogether at that point of time. But then, over a period of time today, if you look at Hyundai, they've probably come up with more than 20 odd models today in India where they have tried to come up with different range, different variation altogether, including the most recently launched, the Hyundai Alcazar. What means to say here is that Hyundai has been trying to supply the market with range and variations of car as per the need of the market. It is not just stopping itself by saying that I'll just produce one hatchback car or one compact SUV or one sedan. They want to compete in every segment. They want to supply as per the needs of the consumer. So supply analysis is a very, very important factor when it comes to the business decision. Why? Because that makes you understand, that makes you analyze on the factor, on the ground that yes, you are equipped to face the competition. You are ready to take the competition heads on and move further. And the most important thing which I would like to say here is that the variables of the supply eventually lead to the demand factor, which means to say that there are a lot of variations today coming in, and technology being a very, very important factor here. I would like to mention a word on this technology factor. Why? Because technology is actually the game changer when it comes to supply. There was a time when India was not really equipped itself with the artificial intelligence, robotics, or the high-end manufacturing game altogether. But today, when you look into India, we have got probably all kind of technology that can gear you up to the best production facility in the world. So what is technology doing? It's bringing a whole lot of shift to the supply chain altogether, and that's where India is trying to gain an edge above the other countries and trying to make itself more into the supply chain. Now, the next thing is that the definition of supply. According to Professor Binam, the supply may mean the amount offered for sale per unit of time. Quite an interesting definition. Why? Because what is being offered to you in terms of supply for that particular unit of time. So right now, if I'm going to talk about supply, it is just the reverse of the demand curve. You would have seen a demand curve. Demand curve is something like this, which is sloping downwards from left to right. Supply curve is just the opposite. It's a rising curve which goes from the left to the right. It's a rising curve altogether. If you look into this diagram, we have price, we have quantity, then a shift in price, a shift in quantity altogether. Okay, so we are going to take the quantity in the x-axis, price in the y-axis, and you see a supply curve coming out there. What is the supply curve trying to say us is that it is the amount offered for sale per unit of time. So that is what is available at that time, at that juncture. Now, Professor Thomas also tries to define saying that supply of goods is the quantity offered for sale in the given market at given point of time at various prices altogether. So again, we are trying to touch upon two important factors called as the price, quantity, and the time factor altogether. So at that given point of time, the price and the quantity that is available in the market is what we are knowing as supply. Now, what happens here is that the time factor is very important. Why? Because the same time there will be a variation again, which means to say that the price of the product that is available today in the market will not be available at the same price, at the same standard tomorrow. So what happens here is that we have to include the time factor. Based on the time factor are the supply pricing coming into picture, followed by the definition of supply. Now, supply has got many definitions. Let's try to understand how the supply of definition factors comes into picture. Now, producer or manufacturer of goods always think to more the supply of goods at high price for the consumer to get more income. Quite logical enough. Why? Because For a manufacturer or for a producer, he just wants to push the good from one side to the other side. He just wants to give this goods to the consumer at the highest price available in the market. He doesn't even want to think twice. He says that this is the price and just push it to the hands of the consumer. Now, whether the consumer buys or not is the secondary part of it. That means whether your product is accepted at that price or not, how will I come to know? So for the producer and manufacturer, they have to understand this factor that people are not just going to buy things at the price quoted by you. There would be a bargain. There would be a system which will try to bring in that push-pull factors. Now, like demand, supply is not with the given quantity. It's called as quantity supplied. It is a relationship between price and quantity. So what happens here is that in supply factor, it is not like demand, as I told you, not a straight price into quantity equation. Here what happens, how much you push into the market, that much will be valued, that much is going to be counted for that day. So that's why I say that the quantity supplied. So price and quantity is again a relationship there where we have to see how much is being pushed into the market and how much is being absorbed by the consumer. Now, as the price of the good rises, the producers are generally want to sell in larger quantity. The reverse is equal in true. So as the price decreases, the supplier don't like to supply or sell it because it is going to come down. So like a demand curve, supply curve can also be put in a table or graph altogether. Now let's try to understand the phenomenon first here. When you see that there is the price rise happening for a particular product. Now let's even take our own hand sanitizers and mask. From the pandemic issue that has been happening for the last 1.5 years in our country, across the globe altogether, in the last 1.5 years, the demand for masks and sanitizers have been going across the world in a great way. So all the people who were preparing the mask and sanitizers found this as the right time to encash. So they started supplying more and more of that same goods so that they can make a good return. Why this is coming in is because as the price rises and people are ready to accept, the producers will also try to push in the maximum goods to the hands of the consumer so that they can make a return. Whereas when tomorrow, let's assuming that the pandemic completely comes to an end and there's no more need of masks and sanitizers, coming to the true fact, then what happens? This business comes down and people will not be engaged in the supply of mask and sanitizer. Why? Because the value of that goods have come down. So that's exactly what we are trying to understand in the definition of supply. Supply is a curve that will keep shifting according to the marketing trends altogether. Today, if you go back to the market and ask for an iPhone 4, you might not get it because that version is quite old, it's out of the market. But you might definitely get an iPhone 10, 11 and 12, but you will not get an iPhone 4 so easily. Why? Because it was launched years back and today people don't want that. People want the newer versions of iPhone to be spoken about or bought, but they don't want to go back and buy the older versions of the phone. That's exactly where supply comes. As the price rises and as there is a trend for it, the goods will keep on going to the hands of the consumer at the prevailing price. Now, moving further, the importance of supply analysis. What is the importance of supply analysis? Why? Because when you see here, the manufacturer to analyze the impact of production changes, policies on increase or decrease in the finished goods. Now, let's try to understand the statement here. Sometime back during the pandemic, there was a very big thrust that was thrown by the government in terms of manufacturing of oxygen, which is a life-saving factor altogether. So people wanted the oxygen cylinders to be manufactured at a larger quantity because you needed to save the lives of people. So now what happens is that people who are engaged in the business of chemicals, who are engaged in the production of oxygen cylinders, will see this as a right opportunity. Why? Because they see that earlier, if they were manufacturing, example, about 100 cylinders a day, day, now they would have ramped up their production to almost 500 cylinders a day or even 1000 cylinders a day. The reason is that now they see that the shift in supply is increasing. The more and more people want it. So automatically what they will do, they will try to ramp up the production to the level to meet the demand. So that's why the supply analysis will help the manufacturer to analyze, to understand what is the need of the hour. Now, the more the upcoming technology that we are speaking about and the shorter the time you can reach the market, you will definitely make a very good return or a revenue factor. Now, let's say this way, iPhone 13 has already started making news in the market. People have started speaking about the iPhone 13. Now, what is going to be kept in store for iPhone 13, we do not know. We might have probably heard about it or seen a YouTube ad, or you might have seen some Instagram pop-ups coming about it. But then what we have really seen about the product or what we are going to unbox out of it, let's see it later. But what is now coming into picture is that if iPhone can start bringing in its products at a faster pace, let's say that if the launch was decided in the month of October, and if iPhone 13 is able to come by August itself with a brighter and a better technology altogether, then automatically that supply at that point of time will create an impact in the market. Why? Because it's a new product, better technology, a better pricing, the need of the customer is also there. Automatically the buy happens, the increase in revenue starts happening. Followed by this analysis can help to determine if this new technology should be adopted or not. Now, this is one thing which is always in the mind of the consumer, which you need to understand with a little amount of depth. Why? Because when I say that a technology is launching or something is coming inconvenience to you, should you really go in for it or not? Should you feel that whether that is needed for you? Is it the need of the hour? Now, let's look into an app called as Farm Easy. Now, Farm Easy is an app which is actually trying to help people to get the medicines at your doorstep. Now, Farm Easy, apart from being an app, apart from being a customized solution for you, what is more important about Farm Easy is the availability of medicines where you can just track it out sitting at your home using your mobile. Now, what happens is that this is something which is like a need of the hour. Everybody needs it. Everybody finds that this is a solution, what I was looking for, and they immediately adopted it. Now, when you look at Zomato or Swiggy, the technology part is very less, but the idea behind the technology, what was their core idea? To bring food right to the doorsteps of the consumer, and that is how they picked it up. See, this idea was there with Pizza Hut, with Domino's, even before Zomato came into picture. Why? Because Domino's and Pizza Hut had something called as a delivery facility. They had it through the mobile, through the internet. Yes, they had come, but Zomato made it even more possible by taking the food of your choice right to your doorstep, which means they made the customers adopt to a technology which is a need of the hour. Being on a pandemic situation where you are restricted from going outside, Zomato definitely understood that point and they bought in a technology which can be adopted, which must be adopted as a need of the hour. So similarly, any new technology that is going to be pointed out, that is going to be coming to the hands of the consumer, requires a two-way analysis. Should I adopt it or not? If it is not needed, then the technology might not be appreciated and you might not be able to make a revenue out of it. So what we try to understand here is that if technology can help you to produce more, the demand for more products will increase, and what impact will it have on the current labor and how they impact supply in the market. That is the another factor. So if that technology can help you to produce more, create an impact in the market and take you further in terms of reducing the labor cost, in terms of reducing the manufacturing cost altogether, then definitely that is a welcome solution for most of us. So this is very, very important when we start understanding and analyzing about the supply analysis. Now, the next thing is that it helps manufacturing to analyze the impact policies and increase. When we see this adoption factor, you need to understand, when I'm just continuing with this. Why? Because in this slide, I'm trying to tell you this factor that technology will definitely have a greater impact in the long run. Now, the other thing is that the another example which I want to quote is that the increase of wages in the market on supply, the labor cost will go up, because when you try to talk about the labor cost factor which is coming in today in the market, you cannot keep the labor cost always constant, because the human needs are changing, the rising cost, so many factors are coming into picture. Now, the alternative to the labor cost is technology. If technology can replace labor at a cost which is lesser, then automatically technology will become an answer to the solution. That is what answer to the problem. Why? Because that's what companies are today trying to do. You might have seen in the paper or in the articles and journals and other factor where people are now trying to reduce on the factors of human existence in terms of doing the work. There are several technology companies in the world who are trying to replace human beings with robotics, with artificial intelligence, and even more better technology. Why? Because they find that it is cost effective and even the quality of work will also go up. So now what happens here is that when you look into this factor, if supply has to be kept constant, then the cost would go up, and if the cost has to be kept constant, the supply would go down, hence driving the prices up if the demand remains unchanged. These are some of the questions which supply analysis tries to answer. Supply cannot remain in a constant factor. So what supply tries to do is that it tries to go up with technology, it tries to go up with the input prices. They try to do a mix and match to understand which can be a better option altogether, which can be a better solution altogether. Why? Because you cannot just stick on to one simple way and say that yes, it will be done, yes, this is what we are looking into. Supply wants to have a solution which is optimum in nature, which is not monotonous. We want to have an optimum solution where you can use the right mix of process, people, and technology so that you will be able to get the maximum output. Now, the next thing is the supply analysis parameters. So, what are the parameters that we are trying to talk? This is the demand, this is the supply, and this is the gap factor that we are going to talk about. Now, let's go into the parameters. Some of the key parameters is product's own price, input prices, technology, expectations of the market, and number of producers present. Now, let me just start going in a very, very simple manner, trying to make you understand the product's factors, the supply analysis factors altogether. Let's take Maggi as an example here. Maggi has been a product which every single Indian would never forget. It's a a wonderful product altogether, and you don't need to have a brand recognition or a brand recall at all. Everybody knows about it. The moment you see that yellow color packet with a red logo saying that Maggi, everybody understands it, even a small kid. Yes. But then the product's own price. Now for Maggi, until EP noodles started coming into the market or some other local players started coming into the market, Maggi had its own pricing phenomenon. If Maggi says that a packet is available for 5 rupees, yes. 50 rupees, yes. Or 500 rupees also, yes. Why? Because people accepted Maggi as what it is. That's it. People never wanted to go and challenge it, or people never had any other alternatives at all. So for a product, the own price itself is one big parameter altogether. When you are completely accepted in the market and when you know that you don't have any alternatives available, not to that great extent, then automatically your own price starts setting up in the market for you. So you can even bring in a packet for 5, 10, 15, 20 or even for 50 rupees. Nobody is going to stop. So that's what I say, product's own price really matters in terms of supply. Whatever price people are ready to accept you, people say that yes, it is okay. The same thing happens with Lay's chips, or the same thing happens with a Pepsi or a Coke. Why? Because they have all reached the position of market leadership where they are completely accepted. People are not going to cross-question them too much. The next thing is the input prices. when the input that is available to manufacture the product is at a very cheaper price, then automatically the supply chain gets an edge altogether. The companies are able to manufacture at a larger quantity with a cheaper price altogether. But many times what happens, moment the input price goes up, the prices of the goods will also start going up. Now, when you typically look into FMCG, especially on the food sector altogether, if there is a variation of price in any one of the materials, the inventory, automatically there will be an impact towards the supply chain, followed by technology. Technology is something as an external factor for any of the company. Whether you talk about a garment manufacturing company or a mobile manufacturing company. But the technology is an external factor. It is not a known internal factor. We adopt technology. We take technology as per our need. Technology is something like salt. We try to take it as per our need. So technology cannot be said that it's a standardized component. It is a customized component. But then that technology will have a greater impact towards the manufacturing. Why? Because technology will tell us that how exactly you can exceed your expectations in terms of supply. How much can you go more? How much can you grow with that system altogether? Expectations of the market. Market will always set expectations on companies. That is because market is consuming all the factors with the consumers coming into picture saying that this company has to do more. So we set expectations on the companies. So matching the expectations of the market becomes a very big challenge. Followed by number of producers present. There are n number of people today in any sector or segment that you are going to talk about. So competition is inbuilt. It is not varying at all. Competition gets inbuilt in your system. So moment I go ahead and say that, sir, I want to start a sports manufacturing goods today, you have n number of people. You have a Nike, you have an Adidas, you have a Reebok, you have a Puma, you have a Skechers, you have every single person in that line. So for me, the existence in that particular market is accepting competition and growing with it. I cannot avoid competition and say that I'm the only person I will survive. No, that's not possible. So when the number of producers are present already in the market, the supply will automatically get varied because everybody will try to produce, everybody will try to formulate the same kind of formula, and everybody will try to give the same kind of quality. But what will differ is that how much each one of us can produce. Now, going further, what is a supply analysis in a business planning? In a business planning, in a space planning, supply and demand analysis is a fit or gap analysis of the time factor for the business space and supply of buildings or space in the current planned portfolio. So when I take the real estate decisions include whether to lease a building or buy a building, all these things are the supply factors altogether. Why I'm putting you this example is that when I come to the real estate sector, this is one area where supply and demand works fantastically well. Before the pandemic started, I'm talking about the year 2019 till the end of 2019 altogether, the growth of the real estate sector was almost on a boom. It was just going up like crazy high. Why? Because the need for space, the need for expansion in terms of office, in terms of the retail, and in terms of any other educational or research purpose was going up to a greater extent. Everybody wanted to expand to every single city in India. People wanted to have that physical presence altogether. Post-pandemic, after 2020 March, what happened is that people slowly started shunning the real estate. Why? Because the culture of working shifted from going to office to work from home. So automatically what happened, even though there was a supply available for office space, the demand started coming down. So people started looking for more for solutions from work from home. So that is where what happened is that the real estate sector completely got shaken up. it was not able to do well. Now that is what you see here. Now what happens is that moment when the economy starts coming back to normalcy, the business decision of whether going back to the office and working or staying back and working at home still is a very big question mark. Why? Because that kind of planning is definitely a very big impact that comes to the real estate sector. One side, when the supply is there, the demand falls down, you don't have a demand at all. The other side, suddenly the demand might go up, but there is not enough supply at all. So real estate sector is a live example where we can see the supply analysis. The next thing is that what are the types of supply, where we try to talk about the law of supply explains the reaction to the supplier when the prices in the market change. Market supply, which will include the short-term supply, long-term supply, joint supply, or when we talk about a composite supply, are the 5 types of supply. So you have a market supply based on the market, the short-term, the long-term for a higher delivery purpose, more than 1 year, joint supply when companies come together. We have a composite, which is like an association kind of thing. So these are the kinds of supply that you can see in the market. With this, I come to the end of this particular session. I hope and believe that all the information shared through this session will be of a great resource and help to you. In the upcoming sessions, we shall be talking more on the supply-demand factor. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.